Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner, as we'll be diving into an essential aspect of any successful Microsoft Dynamics project, staffing. No matter how brilliant your strategies or technologies are, the right people equipped with the right skills are ultimately the magic ingredient to turn those grand plans into reality. I'm your host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on June 15th. 2023. Kris. Another episode of In the Dynamics Corner chair has completed.
Yes.
In this episode, we were able to talk about something that's extremely important in the community, and that is staffing resources for a Business Central implementation, and also some tips on having a successful implementation. With us today, we had Tess MacKay from Nigel Frank.
It's like 20 times to make sure that it was good.
It looks perfect. It looks perfect.
Good.
It's great. I like the background.
Yeah, me too. I like the background. I like the bookshelf.
You read the instructions.
Yeah, I read the instructions. I'm home for the weekend for my brother's wedding, so I had to make sure I had a sequestered area where no one was yelling or in the background. So
when we start seeing people running back and forth behind you, you can swat them out.
Yeah, they have a strict no 10 to 11 crowding in the house, so we should be good to go.
You sent everybody out for coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. All right, Tess, the moment we've been waiting for.
I've been waiting for this for days. It's been on a countdown in my calendar.
Our calendars too.
I love it.
I do too. Talking with you about something that many have difficulty with is what I've been looking forward to. It's difficult for customers. It's difficult for partners. I think it's difficult for everybody in the community. And that is how to staff or resource a project for an implementation for either a pre-go live or a post-go live when they're in what some may call maintenance mode or support. And I thought, who else can we talk to than one of the experts at staffing projects?
Here I am. I'm sure everyone is probably a little familiar with the infamous Nigel Frank, but yeah, staffing has been part of my go-to day-to-day for the last 6 years. It's been a crazy ride, actually. Can't believe it's been 6 years so far.
Time goes fast, and it goes faster, I think, as you get older. If you would, you started talking about where you work now and help with sourcing of resources for projects at Nigel Frank. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I joined Nigel Frank actually right out of college. So crazy back in 2017. Had no idea what recruitment was, had no idea what Dynamics Nav was at all. Hopped in and I was like, this looks like something that's extremely interesting. I definitely want to get into the IT world. So joined right out of college, and we kind of fell in love with just overall Microsoft Dynamics, with recruitment, with customers, and getting to know a little bit more about the IT world. So been there ever since. Started off as a trainee, and now I am the vice president for the Dynamics Nav, GP, Business Central, and Azure team. So we have a team of 25 consultants that also have immersed themselves in the Dynamics world, and just really have loved the journey, loved the ride, and definitely loved meeting so many great customers and partners, and learning about the ins and outs of Nav especially, and now more recently Business Central and Azure. So that's sort of the snapshot of the last 6 years for me. But it's been pretty awesome, and get to meet great people like yourselves. So
great. Thank you.
Very cool.
Two things. So you are focused on Dynamics Business Central, Dynamics 365 Business Central, and Azure sourcing. Mm-hmm. Another thing you said killed me. Kris, did you hear? 2017.
Yeah.
2017, I think I was, 18 years in working with Business Central. I think it's time for me to, this conversation right here will be my end. I think after this, I'm retiring.
I actually was listening to one of your podcasts. I can't remember which episode it was, but you were talking about the good old nav days before internet was a thing. And that was, I was like, dang, okay. That really gave me a full insight into how long nav's been around.
Yes, you don't remember the days of dial-up, like that sound of the modem. You're like, that was my sound effects for the session. So it's in the PC Anywhere when you had to connect remotely because you didn't have RDP at the time, so you'd have to go somewhere, install PC Anywhere, and set it up. Anyway, we won't reminisce back pre-testing.
Yeah, I know. I told Kris we got to get the Corner podcast on TikTok, and I think he almost passed out from fright from that. But we'll get you modernized to the TikTok space eventually.
If you could help us do that, I don't even know. I hear TikTok on the news.
How to start.
I don't even know what it is. So I'll be
your social media manager. Don't worry, I'll get you out there. We'll get you some more followers. I already have you favorited on Spotify, so we'll start branching out. Get some more audience.
Hired.
Done.
And you can get. we'll split the profits with you because 0 times 3 or divided by 3 is still 0. So no, we appreciate it, but it is difficult, and I'm glad to hear about your experience, and also glad to have you as a contact because it is a challenge when it comes to finding resources with implementations and managing projects. It's the product itself, to me, seems to be taking off. There's a lot more businesses that are using the application, a lot more businesses that are implementing the application, and it's not focused on one area. It's more globally. So with what you work on with staffing, do you focus domestic or international, or what is your source or region for staffing?
So we have multiple offices across the world. So we have 21 offices globally. In the US, we have 10 right now. So our hub is in the New York office. So we focus all across the country, but mainly heavily on the East Coast side of things, at least for my team. We also have an office in Canada. So we pretty much cover a majority of North America. And then, of course, we have hubs across UK, Germany, Singapore. So we're pretty much everywhere. We have a lot of cohesion between the offices too, which is nice. So I know a lot of companies are similar to ours, honestly, where it started in the UK, came over to the United States. So we have a lot of communication with companies that are international like that. But for our team specifically, covers the US and Canada.
Okay. So the company as a whole covers international, but
yes.
Your territory, I guess you could call it, is primarily focused on the East Coast, which is still rather large.
Yeah, definitely rather large for sure.
Oh, the metro area of New York and DC, Boston. I mean, there's a lot of businesses in a small area. What have you seen trending with the application? With what do you call? I mean, there's customers. I call customers end users of the application. Then there's partners for you because you cross into both areas. What do you refer to the individuals that you work with or the businesses that you work with?
Definitely end users and partners. I would say obviously all our customers, but I would say definitely a good differentiator is end users and partners, given the fact that for the most part, we are working and supporting the end users, but also with partners, we typically will have a good idea of like who the end user is to make sure that everyone's on the same page there. But for the most part, end users is sort of, I guess, what we would refer to. And then on the Azure side, I would say same thing, definitely end users and partners. And on the Azure space, it's definitely heavier supporting the partners than it is directly with the end users. And then I would say on the Dynamics side, I think it's a pretty even split for sure on what we support.
Okay. And in your experience over the past 6 years working with the sourcing for end users and partners, have you seen any trends as far as have partners been working with you more, end users working with you more? Has it been Business Central, Nav, Azure? What have you seen trending as the trend for which types of resources for applications that are needed?
Absolutely. So it's definitely been a nice journey from 6 years ago to now. I would say 6 years ago when I first came in, it definitely seemed more, with the partners, recruitment versus the partners, and then trying to beat out for the end users. I would say that was definitely not the structure that we wanted. We definitely wanted to have a much more communicative approach, consultative approach, working with the partners to support the end users. At the end of the day, that's what matters, is making sure the end user is supported. So I think we've definitely evolved out of that aspect and moved more into, okay, great, let's work with the partner, let's work with the end user and find that balance of what do they need to either complete the implementation or to find that niche skill set, provide that on-site support, whatever the case may be. I would say a big demand that we've received from both partners and end users, to our reluctance, has been a lot of on-site support. So that's definitely coming back into action over the last year or so, especially. I would say things like project managers has always been something that has been heavily relied on for us, because most of the times, partners may not have either the bandwidth or someone that can be on site from a project manager perspective. So that's been a big demand for us. And then, even some skill sets like, finance consultants or trainers, that's typically been an area where both partners and end users have reached out to us more towards like go live, post go live area. And then as of late, huge demand for Power BI resources, again, on both the partner and end user side. So those have been sort of the trends we've seen over the last few years, at least from my perspective, from both partners and end users.
I was curious to know about that because my world is Business Central and that ecosystem. And with them changing the licensing, where you used to have a developer license to work and modify the application, or 2 different levels of developer license, now to where customers don't necessarily need that license to make extensions. I was wondering if there was a change. A few things that you had mentioned, and I'm glad that you mentioned it even subtly. When sourcing for projects for Business Central and Azure implementations, you mentioned project management, financial consultants. Sourcing of the projects isn't always technical, or in technical in the sense of you need a developer or you need someone with the technical skills. It's also important to make sure that you work and have project managers. You have functional resources that can help implement the day-to-day and use the application, which is another challenge. So it's not just finding the technical people to make the modifications and the enhancements and set it up. It's the day-to-day use and support and making sure that it goes through.
Yeah. I would say, that like requirements gathering phase and the planning phase of the implementation, that is typically where sometimes we see a gap, because to your point, it's jumping right into the development or the actual technical changes. But prior to doing all of those things, you have to actually do the planning, requirements gathering, which requires, people that can understand the business processes, what you're trying to get out of the implementation, what changes, what modifications, et cetera. So that's definitely been something, even from like when I first started, I was like, oh, IT, that means developers. But as I've obviously gotten more understanding of like the actual ecosystem and full lifecycle implementations, that's definitely a massively important part. But there's so many other factors and skill sets that are needed to ensure for that as smooth as we can implementation.
Yes, all implementations are smooth. And if somebody has heard of or has gone through a poor implementation, let me know, because I've never heard of one in the 20-something years that I've been doing this.
And they always go live on the exact date that was originally planned too. So
they do. I know a lot that go early, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So because they were staffed properly.
Exactly.
So now we talked about the projects, and there's different roles within an implementation, as we just spoke about. To jump right into it, how can you determine 2 things? 1, what you need to staff a project. 2, how do you find the resources to work on these projects? And if somebody was searching for, well, I'll just stop there. I usually load up the questions, but lately I've been forgetting what I ask, and I just let you go through. So
it's all right.
We'll just leave
it's okay to be excited. I can handle a lot of questions at once. Don't worry, I'm used to it. So I would say the biggest thing for us is making sure we are fully understanding at what phase of the project an end user is in, and vice versa, making sure the end user understands what phase of the project they're in. So sometimes people will come to us in the middle of the project, the end of the project, in a rescue project, or months before the project even begins. So one of the biggest things that our team really hones in on is just mapping out what stages of the project go when and what skill sets are needed for each of those phases. So that's like the most simplest way to come up with, okay, you're at the requirements gathering phase. Great. Let's see what we have internally. Do we have a PM? Do we have a business analyst? How is the partner involved? If we're more in the just about to go into the post-go live? Do we have a training set up? Do we have testers? Do we have people that can provide that post-go live support? Things like that. So I would say understanding the phase of the project is so important. Understanding the dynamic internally. So who do we have dedicated to the project? Who are the stakeholders? Who's actually going to take ownership internally of this project? And then, of course, understanding the partner dynamic as well. What does the partner team look like? Communicating with the partner as well to see if they have any gaps, if they maybe, could require some on-site support, or they could use some additional X, Y, and Z. And then we can hop in there and help with whatever sort of gap is missing. So that's sort of our thought process when speaking to customers, and then of course partners as well, to understand that timeline. And then we can of course provide them with the relevant resources, skill sets, or even, a niche consultant that has a specific module or a customization, like whatever the case is. So that's sort of our rundown there. And then a big area too that we have found super important is understanding the dynamic from a change management perspective. So I'm sure you have
change management
experience.
That gets forgotten.
Change management.
So it's so funny that you did that sound, because when I was coming up sort of like spitballing ideas of like do's and don'ts of the implementation, I was saying to myself, a lot of times people think of it as pain management when it should be change management, because everyone always assumes change equals scary, daunting. I want to run away from it. But and that's with anything in life, right? Like anytime people experience change, the first reaction is to dig the heels in, not embrace it, not understand it. But change management is so important for the implementation. So we've definitely evolved to become that more console during these projects to help the end users understand this implementation is going to bring all these efficiencies. It's going to help with these processes. It's going to help with your overall day-to-day and make your life easier, so that they can fully understand that and then communicate it to the rest of the team. So there isn't, a group of the company that's resistant to the implementation, which, as we all know, can lead to delays, lack of buy-in, obstacles left, right, and center, which is never happy for anyone and actually does cause pain for the partner.
It is.
That's a good call out.
Implementations are pain management. It is. Yeah. It's change management, and not from the sense of software application development change management. Change management, as far as business processes may be concerned, because there are pains that need to be handled. So going through the implementation and managing the pain of change, because like you had stated, people are fearful of change or fearful of the unknown, or they want to do things this way because they've been doing it for 20 years. And
it's mental preparation for an organization, because that's a big investment.
So do you staff, mental health professionals for projects too?
Actually, funny you say that. I'm actually certified. I'm a mental health first aider. So I'm here just for a pro bono assignments. Anyone that needs a little vent session, I'm all ears.
Chris, look at that. We now have a social media mental health specialist on staff.
That's important.
That is
important. It really is. It really is.
No, mental health is important.
Absolutely.
It's something that's serious, and it's you never think about that when you start talking about some of these changes, the stress and the anxiousness that somebody may have going through this. But as far as staffing a project, you mentioned take a look at where you are in a project for the type of resources you need. Is there a difference between full-time and contract? I know there is a difference, and how it's set up. But when you're working on a project, make the determination if you need a full-time resource or if you need a resource for a short period of time on a contract basis. Are there considerations, and what would those considerations be for the differentiator between which one you need?
Great question. I love that one. So I specifically manage the contract to hire desk, but we do have a permanent desk as well. So for any conversations we have with our end users or our partners, we'll bring in both sides of the business just to ensure they understand we have either the permanent option or the contract option. I will say for project-based assignments with end users, they typically gravitate towards contractors, just because there won't necessarily be a need for 3 years of work or even longer than that for someone that's more full-time. So they'll want someone to come in for 3, 6, 9, 12 months for the implementation, and then maybe provide some post-go live support. I will say on the partner side, we definitely see more of a demand for permanent resources, which is pretty self-explanatory. They want to have that resource on full-time, to be dedicated to the company, to be able to provide support from multiple users. Somewhere we'll also see more of a contract-based need will be on both the end user or the partner side if they have a very niche skill set that's needed. So maybe like an Alice retail, or again, an on-site requirement, or a Power BI resource, something that maybe isn't the core skill of the end user or the partner. But for the most part, we try to find that blend of permanent and contract. And of course, we always take into consideration, what does the customer want? What do they need? Sometimes they won't know, and they'll ask us to help them kind of plan that out for them. So we'll always map out, here's option A, permanent, here's option B, contract, here's option C, contract to hire, and then here's option D, a permanent and a contractor. So those are sort of all of the maps we lay out for them, and always make sure they feel comfortable with the option, and of course can see the benefits of both. But of course, I'm obviously used to the contract to hire side, which we've seen a lot more and more just with these larger implementations or migrations or integrations.
It is tough to determine what you need. And I think based upon the skill, because we've been saying multiple phases of implementation. You have, when you're going through the implementation, there's periods of time where you have a high volume of resources that are needed either for configuration, modification, enhancement, setup, training. Then there's the post-go live support. And how do you determine, okay, do I need to have somebody full-time that will stay through the life of the project in this role versus contractor versus maybe have contract support afterwards? Yeah, it's a difficult equation, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of question asking, active listening, getting to the pain points. One of the big things too we always suggest is if the end user does really want someone permanent, whether they're junior or more mid-level, to grow into the role, we'll always suggest like, hey, like why not bring on a consultant to help train up that permanent employee, take a load off of your plate? Because a lot of times, someone, internally has to take on everything IT related internally, in addition to the project, in addition to 50 other million things. And they're taking on this massive load with no support, or maybe they're stretched super thin. So we always suggest that option as well, just to help them, again, just take a load off and provide that.
No, I can see that. So if in the transition, because you're moving from potentially one application to another, or, even upgrading, I guess you could say, still moving from one application to another, there is an influx of work for a person. So bringing in additional resources to support them is a good option.
Yeah.
The big question is, how can someone find these resources?
Magic.
That's what I mean, there's all this need for all these resources. How does one find these resources?
So we are pretty lucky. We actually have the second largest database, second to Microsoft, of resources. So that's definitely helped a lot. We have it very mapped out to ensure that we have everything keyworded properly. We have our bunch of candidates that we've worked with for years. And also just networking. We get a lot of referrals from people. We get connected with a lot of new people to ensure that we have all those resources ready to go. When I joined 6 years ago, my boss had been there for 5 years prior. So he had already had this massive network of candidates that he had constantly been working with. And then I get introduced to them, and then that cycle kind of continues. And, we're always looking to get introduced to new people. One of the big things, full transparency, that we tried to get out of a while back is we wanted to make sure we weren't disrupting any teams internally, whether that be partners or end users. So we wanted to make sure that we never pulled anybody out or did anything that, disrupted anyone's staffing or internal teams. So we made sure that all of that was kind of smoothed out and worked with people that were actually available or actively looking no matter what. So that's kind of how the evolution of like our original candidate pool has sort of grown. And then since then, it's just been, again, working with people in the Dynamics market. I know the Dynamics world is so small, but it's actually so big. There's so many people out there that are constantly looking for project-based work, full-time employment, and introducing us to more consultants or full-time employees. So it's really been great just to expand that network. And one of the big things we always pride ourselves on is making sure our candidates are fully qualified. They have the expertise or the skill set for what the end user is requiring or the partner is requiring. We would never want to put a candidate in an uncomfortable position by not being able to complete the work, or vice versa, putting the client in a position where they get someone that they're expecting to be able to do, X, Y, and Z, and unfortunately the candidate can't. So we make sure that there is, full qualifications, previous projects done, references, things like that. So that, again, we can hand the consultant over to an end user and they speak to them, assuming everything goes well, pretty smooth sailing from there. So that's sort of our path, plus a little bit of magic thrown in there to get candidates over to the right partners and end users. So
it is. It's you had mentioned it. It's a very small community, but it's also a large community. And to me, you do also. I come across a lot of the same resources at various places over the years too, and I do see some new resources coming in, and I wish more were coming in, because there is a lot of demand. And also, if there's a lot of demand, it means it's good things going for the application, which in turn feeds it to have more demand, which is good.
We actually had, I think actually, Brad, you were there. I don't know if you witnessed this too, but when we had our first meet and greet a while back, one consultant looked at another consultant and was like, I know you. And he was like, I knew you from a project 15 years ago. And I was like, that says it all, like what the Dynamics community is, which is incredible. That people have just known each other through years of partner channels and groups and whatnot. But I was like, wow, that is incredible that you recognize each other and remembered the exact project you worked on together.
Brad's been around.
And
I heard from the podcast.
He gets passed around.
Pre-internet,
back in the Stone Ages. You guys are funny. That first meet and greet was a great experience that you had. And I too, also, if you recall, there was somebody there that I used to do quite a bit with many years ago that I was totally unexpected. I even asked him, I said, wow, I haven't seen you in a long time. Are you still, I didn't know you were still around working on this application. So there was a lot of meeting and greeting of reacquaintancing. Say it for me, Kris. Reacquaintancing. Is that a word? Look it up.
We'll make it a word.
It's a new word.
We'll count it.
Yeah. So it is. So it's. I'd like to see also if there are ways for us to be able to get more resources to come into it. What you may refer to, some refer to as the junior level resources, because they can also learn the application. It's no longer a trade secret that's hidden. There's a lot of information out, and Microsoft themselves are doing a great job of putting the information out. Mm-hmm. So now, what are your top, how many? 5, 7? What do we have? Do's and don'ts for staffing a project.
So I have 7.
7 do's or 7 don'ts, or 7?
I have 7 do's and don'ts.
Excellent.
And I channeled my inner English major and made them rhymes, just what the little do's and don'ts are. Make them memorable, make them easy to understand. But this kind of touches upon a lot of the things that we've already spoken about. Number 1 do. So I'll go through the do's first, right?
Number 1.
All right. Number 1 for do's. We're going to start positive here. Do's, goals and roles. So number 1, making sure that you have defined goals, you understand the objective of the implementation, that you have clear communication for all the stakeholders involved, and you know what the general roles are internally. So that's number 1, biggest thing there. Number 2, no cramming, only planning. So kind of a stretch there with the rhyme, but I know we spoke about this earlier, to alleviate any stresses, mental health stresses for implementations like this. Super, super important to make sure that the planning phase is well thought out, leveraging your internal team, leveraging your partner, consultants, to ensure that you have everything mapped out, key go lives, key targets, key, milestones throughout the implementation to ensure that, again, it's not rushed. It's very well thought out over 6, 9, 12-month period, whatever the case is. In that space, definitely important to have, again, clear communication with your partner, but also this would be a great time to leverage a business analyst, a project manager, an implementation consultant to just help support that initial stage of the implementation. One thing that we've definitely helped end users understand is that if you want your implementation to kick off September 1, that doesn't mean you start looking and planning September 1. It means you start looking and planning in July to kind of get the ball rolling and get everything moving so that when September 1 comes, you have everything ready to go. Third, this is my favorite, teamwork makes the dream work. So why this is super important is absolutely making sure that you are communicating internally. Not only, this is from an end user perspective, communicating with all of the branches or the divisions that are going to be involved in the implementation. So understanding what their requirements are, what their issues, challenges, stresses are. So that's all either addressed or communicated to ensure that no one is feeling angsty about the implementation. And then again, of course, leveraging your partner, leveraging consultants to ensure that you're supported from all ends. And that, again, teamwork always makes the dream work. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say teamwork doesn't make the dream work. So that's number 3. Number 4 would be assignments and requirements. This is another stretch for my rhyme here, but again, requirements gathering phase. So ensuring that you fully understand exactly what we're trying to get out of the implementation, what the business processes are, what the workflows are, what's needed out of the system. So every implementation is unique in some way. So not every end user is going to have from start to finish the exact same implementation. Of course, there'll be similarities, but everyone's business is different. So really understanding what's needed for your business to make that implementation smooth is going to be super key. This is one of my favorites because we have definitely seen this. I'm sure you guys are no strangers to this as well. But number 5, justifying the customizing. So sometimes we found that customers assume customize everything. So obviously that can be very difficult. So finding that balance between customizing what's necessary and then over customizing.
That one right there, I don't mean to cut you off at number 5.
No, go for it.
But that is important. And I see so many modification requests so early on in an implementation. I feel like saying, did you even look at the application? So there's a lot of people or a lot of implementations want modifications before they even put a customer into the system and tried to create a sales order, for example. I've always been of the mindset, put the minimum amount of information necessary into the system, start going through your processes, then identify the gaps, because you can paint yourself into a box by asking for modification, saying you must have this, we must need this, this has to be in there, having that rigidity because their fear of change or the fear of process, not seeing that the application may have that. And now you have the carrying cost of those modifications for the life of that application. Or I've also seen the flip side where there's been implementations where they were persistent on having modifications made to have a certain process. Then as time progressed, they were held tight within the application and had some limitations because of their modification. They saw the way that it was handled natively, to use that word loosely, within the application. And they said, why didn't you tell us about this? And it's, why aren't we doing it this way? I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that. And it's everybody, a lot of implementations, I don't want to say everybody, a lot of implementations feel that they have this this unique way of processing that it has to be in there. It has to be in there or we can't do it. It goes back. I'll tell a story now. It's probably before both of you were even born. But I went into an implementation and they had this report called the President's Report. And I went in, they gave it to me, and they said, this was many, many years ago, back when you had to go on site because it was before the internet. Well, before people used the internet. And when we were in there, and the owner of the company said, if you can do this President's Report, we'll purchase the application. It's a very complicated report. This is what it does. So we spent time doing the analysis. I looked at it, went through it, and I said, yes, we can do it. He goes, great. So then we worked on it. We started creating it, going through it. And I said, okay, who uses this report? So then I talked with the woman that printed the report. She said, oh, I take this and I give this to a person. spoke with that person, asked them what they did with it, because I was trying to go over the mindset, well, maybe you don't need to print it. Maybe there's somewhere else in the system that you could use it. Then they ended up giving it to, a few people went through it, and they ended up giving it to the owner of the company. And I asked him what he did with it. He said, I throw it away because I figured they already did what they needed to do with it. Not one person in that chain used that report, but that was a report that they had around for years. And that was his basis for determining to purchase the application, among other things. But that was
surprisingly still common.
It is, and it is. So you just may be going on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, I totally agree. I mean, we've had so many customers come to us if they're moving, let's say they're moving like 2017 to Business Central, and we'll ask about customizations, and they're like, we are literally leaving everything behind. We don't want any customizations. We want these ripped all out because we customize for no reason. But obviously, like you said, there's instances where customizations or extensions are necessary, but after you take a look at out of the box first and then see from there, what do we actually need? And that's a great place to leverage the partner or consultant so they can help you understand, okay, you can either do this or we can continue with out of the box, but rushing into that customization. And this is
my favorite of your 5 so far, by the way. I'm just
great.
saying. But it's,
well, I don't know. You haven't heard 6 yet, so maybe 6.
I love the rhyming part though, so keep it up.
She's trying.
Thanks, Kris.
I'll give her credit.
That's my English major in me. All right, you ready for number 6?
Number 6.
Train the brain. This is one of my favorites too, because we already touched upon this, but after or during or towards the end, obviously when we have this amazing system, we moved over to Business Central or whatever the case is, we can't fully utilize the system if we don't know how to use it. So we have oftentimes had customers be like, we have no idea what's in our system. We have no idea what's not in our system. We don't know how to use it. We're frustrated. The second I hear someone say Business Central is not user-friendly, I'm immediately like, alarm bells. That most likely just means you weren't trained properly on it because it's obviously extremely user-friendly. So training the brain is super, super important. Leveraging your partner, a consultant to specifically train, provide documentation for future starters at your company. Giving that hands-on end user support is super key because then you can actually take advantage of all of these new features or just Business Central out of the box or whatever version you're moving to. Because nothing's more frustrating than a smooth implementation, but then end users are like, well, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. So having that training aspect is definitely number 6. Super
training.
key.
That is important. Train the brain. I like that. Clear your head and get into the application. So easy to blame in a software application for all of your problems. Did you know that?
Oh,
and it's always
I've done it myself. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? I'll get frustrated. It's not the system. It's just me because I'm mindlessly clicking something and not actually doing the right thing when it would just be a simple, hey, do it this way instead. And then poof, everything I wanted to do
because
exactly
it doesn't work the way you think it should work. I run into this often too. Yeah. It should be doing it well. Just go with this way and you'll do exactly what you need. Just because you think it should this way is interesting. I like that word, interesting.
And then we got last but not least, this is a perfect rhyme actually. Test before you rest. So this is one actually I heard quite a bit at DynamicsCon as well.
But did you add your name in there? Test.
Well, we can say I'll do
Chris, we have to put these up. We have to put these up, and when you do, put test.
Yeah.
With capital TESS.
Your name in it.
And test. See this top 7 that you have here, you should personalize. Chris, great point. Test.
Yes.
Before you rest.
I'll do my best. I'll go back through. I'll add a little flair to it. But yeah, testing phase before go live, making sure testing is done thoroughly. Again, nothing's more frustrating for a customer if they don't test and then things aren't working and then they get mad at the system or they get mad at the partner or the consultant. But some simple testing can easily identify small fixes, bugs, things that can be tweaked so that when the actual go live hits, things are running a lot more smooth. I know that has been something that we've been pulled into a lot for just providing that testing support because sometimes it is tough if you don't have the people internally to do it. It can be time consuming, right? So that's a big important stage, which rounds it out at number 7 to make sure that testing is done before people kick their feet up and enjoy
that was
the newly released
great.
system.
testing goes both ways. I'm partial to this one too. So this might be, I'll go with number 5 and 7, just maybe from the technical point of view, because testing is important, because the worst time to test is after you go live. And it's funny that nobody has time to test, but they have time to deal with all the problems, which oftentimes take 2 to 3 to 4 times as much time as if you would have spent the time testing. And often it's end users, partners, a lot of people don't understand the value of the testing, therefore the cost. A lot of people just look at the hours of the upfront, and then they worry why they go over budget because they have all these fixes. Because one, the users, when you're testing, you're also training, right? So you're talking about the training to make sure you understand the processes and they're working. And also you can find so many issues later.
Oh yeah.
And there's automated testing that you can do as well with the customizations. I'm a little partial to that as well, to ensure that any modifications or enhancements that you make or add to the system also continue to ensure that you have a functional application. And we had a previous podcast guest on, and they talked about something which was important, which I never thought of on the forefront of testing, but it was always in the back of my mind, was user permissions. Test user permissions before you go live too. It's such an important part. I can't tell you how many implementations I've worked on where I walked in and someone is 300 super users because nobody could figure out the permissions. And I always say, nobody will tell you what they can't do. Nobody will tell you what they can do. They'll tell you what they can't do.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was I'm sorry.
Yeah, we actually had, obviously on a smaller scale, but we rolled out Power BI. And we went through I was one of the first, I was like the initial guinea pig for it. So I was doing a lot of testing, run throughs, trials. We were going through all of these different features, and I can't imagine the poor data team who did an incredible job. I can't imagine the pain and horror they probably would have experienced if they just rolled it out in one day and we're like, all right, great, let us know how it goes. If we had not done the countless months of testing, questioning, running through different things that didn't work, things that did work, adding features, all of those things that ultimately led to a much more smooth rollout of Power BI across the globe. Because it took, time and time and time to make sure those features were going nice and smooth.
That was a great top 7 do's.
Thank you.
Now, we have to go with the top 7 don'ts.
The don'ts.
Kris, we have to keep track of how many times we've come across these don'ts.
I can tell you that these don'ts are ones I see all the time. So I'm sure for you, Brad, also you, pre-internet, definitely have seen for years. So these also have some rhymes.
I invented the internet.
Yes, number 1, don't have a need for speed. So this is one of the things that relates back to my first point. So far too often we have seen customers sprint through the planning phase, even thinking about the implementation, to the point where they're like, oh yeah, we want to get it done in 2 months, or we want to kick off the project tomorrow. And we're having the first discussion. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So making sure that you're not rushing through the implementation process, taking time to plan it, to configure, test, come up with your project team, and understanding what the amount of time, effort, and manpower it's going to take is super important. Because if you rush, it's going to lead to mistakes. It's going to lead to Band-Aid fixes. It's going to lead to things that cause headaches for the internal team, the partner, and the consultant. So we obviously don't want that. So that's number 1. Number 2, this is one that hurts my soul. I'm sure probably hurts your soul too. Do not judge it and not budget. So this is one that has been painful before to all parties. So we have seen customers not understand the cost of what it takes to implement. So they'll assume, or they won't fully ask about it. But we've unfortunately gone through projects where midway through they realize they've capped out their budget and they cannot continue, or they have to pause, or they have to push things off. So making sure that you fully understand the budget from a partner perspective, customer perspective, consultant perspective is so important, because then you can allot for that, right? You can plan for that. You can understand that. and you're not stuck with this massive bill and being like, whoa, what the heck? I didn't think it was going to be this expensive. That one definitely we've experienced quite a bit. I don't know about you guys, but that's been one that's been tough.
I think everyone, they come across and don't understand what it takes to do the implementation. And I don't mean that implementations are expensive. It's, to me, expensive is relative. How big is the implementation? It's the value for what you're getting that you pay for. A lot of people feel that they should get a deal or things should be cheaper, should be free when they're consuming. But if you were to ask them to do something and you tried to, you know, have them do it for free, they would say, no, why would you want me to do something for free? I've had these conversations with some people and they feel that they should get good deals, but they don't want to give good deals, you know, which is a little bit sidebar to this. But expensive is relative, but you should realistically plan and expect that you will have to pay for an implementation.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you do your planning properly, you can come close to what you budget. If you do everything properly, and if you identify what you need to do, you can come close to what your budget is or what you expect to pay for the application. Yes, things come into play as well. Again, if you have a budget, keep track of it. A lot of times people will go through and they realize, oh, maybe we want to do this now too. All those infamous change requests. So now, you know, I budgeted one number. Now we're way over budget, but I'm not going to go back and say and realize that I asked for 40,000 additions to this original budget, and now I'm over budget. So the planning is important, and the judge before you budget, or judge it before you budget.
Yes, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, it is so true, because it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $10 million, right? It's just the importance of understanding what you're getting out of that $10 or $10 million is important. And like you said, you know, I always tell customers, you know, you want the implementation done right. You don't want it done fast. You don't want it done for the lowest price. You want it done so that it actually benefits your business and you're not having all these ramifications, you know, months after the implementation is done. And yeah, I love what you said about the scope, right? Sometimes we'll present a scope to the customer. They'll love it. We'll kick the project off. Everything's going great. But then at the end of it, it is over what was initially expected. But that was because throughout the implementation, you know, they added this extension or they asked for this module to be implemented or whatever the case is that wasn't originally planned for. And then are blindsided when, you know, that scope or that quote isn't initially matched. But it's because those other features were added, which is okay, right? We want the customer to have exactly the system that they want, but making sure that they understand that will sometimes come with more time, more money, but it will ultimately benefit you 10 times more than if you weren't to do that in the first place.
No, that is important. And also with we go back to the sprinting. I see all these stories that come to my head. I'm a storyteller today. That's
all right. Rhymes do that to a person.
They do. I feel like, you know, I'm a storyteller. It did. See, it's the mental health professional in you that now you've, you know, forced us to go back to story time. It's also expectations. I remember someone asking for something to be done or a project to be worked on, and they said, when can you start? This is another big important piece. And I said, October is when this task can be done, right? We'll just say a task in this case. They said, okay, well, I found someone that can do it tomorrow. And I said, okay. Don't you know who they called in October when they were still waiting? Because they went with someone they thought was cheaper and faster. Just because they wanted to get that done, instead of going with someone that was being realistic, saying it's going to be this.
That hurts me.
This is when you're going to do it. And I said, well, this is when I would have been able to work on it, and you're still here. And now I can't because, you know, time has passed and now you can go down the road. But so many times I see that, which is, that's not a staffing issue, but it's also like a project planning issue, is have a sense of reality on both sides. If you're implementing or a resource working on tasks, be upfront and say, I can't work on it until this date. And if somebody gets that, have the understanding that if sometimes things take time and people have schedules. I also almost go with the mindset on the side one. If somebody can do it tomorrow, Why can they do it tomorrow?
Exactly.
What else do they have going on?
My favorite customers are the ones that, you know, are open to that, again, actual like consultative approach where they want to understand all aspects of it, understand all sides, and aren't just sticking with one opinion and not being open to other suggestions. So definitely agree there, which segments perfectly into my next magic number 3. This one is another rhyme stretch, so bear with me on this one. Voluntary, solitary. So again, touching on all the things we've already talked about, utilizing the partner that you have on record to take advantage, work with them on the project is so important. Utilizing your internal team, utilizing a consultant, finding that like perfect blend of all 3 is leading to the best chances of success for an implementation. To your point, I've had a couple of customers come to us for implementation support and then back off and not really use their partner and kind of just coast through the implementation, which ultimately leads to most of the time them going back to the partner, back to us for support, you know, months later when we, you know, everyone could have been working together from the beginning. So back to my dues of teamwork to make the dream work, definitely utilize that. Don't, you know, take on an implementation by yourself on top of your normal day-to-day work. It can be overwhelming, and it can definitely be frustrating if you don't ultimately have that support from all ends. So that's number 3. Number 4, this, we've already touched upon this, but the pain management versus change management. So yes, obviously change management requires uncovering the pain points, really understanding, you know, what issues or obstacles there are internally and smoothing those out, making sure everyone's on board with the change and embracing it. So that's a big thing that, again, you know, we don't need to harp on it, but one of those things, if you're digging your heels in without understanding the benefits of an implementation, it can lead to obstacles all over the place. So I think that part is definitely one of the most important. And if you are someone that is finding the implementation to be a pain, figure out where you can find the information or where you can sit down with the partner, a trainer, or someone to help understand the benefits that you'll ultimately see that will make all of that time and efforts worth it. Because it can be, you know, different for certain people and it can affect people, you know, internally different. So if someone is experiencing that pain, don't let it sit there. Figure out how you can see it more as a positive change and ultimately the best change for the business. So that's definitely a big one there. Number 5.
See, I should have been doing that for each number.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning.
Well, moving forward. It's okay. It's a learning experience, right?
It is.
Number 5. This one I think you'll like because of my rhyme. Don't be a hater to the data. So that one's a little bit of a stress too. But data migration.
Data, Kris.
Data migration. This one is huge. Oftentimes we have found customers not understanding the importance of that data migration phase and how important it is from having that solid plan of migrating the data from your existing system to the new system. I mean, understanding that you need to make sure that that's a quality migration and that the data is accurate when it is moved from point A to point B. We've had a couple of projects where someone will be moving from, you know, Dynamics to a new ERP or vice versa. And they'll just assume, oh, it's not important anymore. We're moving to a new system. But that's when we're like, no, like all of that data is so key to be moved over properly. And if that's done in a lackluster way or you're not utilizing the right resources, that can lead to a lot of long-term suffering and pain. So that's...
You said something I didn't like. One,
oh, no.
Who would move from Dynamics to another system?
I know.
And why would you help them?
It honestly made me sad to say it.
Why would you say that?
It happened. It's never happened. It's never happened. I made that up.
Theoretically, if someone were to want to move from Dynamics to another application, but
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Data is important to make sure the data matches the application.
Exactly.
It is also important to determine what data you need to move. Mm-hmm. It's quality, not quantity, because you need to move what you need to function, and also accessibility is important. I've seen many migrations where they wanted to move everything since the beginning of time, when in reality they didn't need to.
Since pre-internet, you don't need that. You don't need that.
There's other ways you could reference that data if you need, but make sure that you bring the data. See, I have to say it now because you have HADA to the data.
Hate it to the data.
We say data up here anyway. You know that, right? You
Data,
speak like we speak the same language, kind of.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Quality over quantity. If you ask anyone on my team, they would literally be like, Tess says that literally 50 times a day. So that
hold on a second. We're doing this live. I'm going to ask
quantity.
a member of your team right now what you
Phone
say
a
about
friend.
that.
Text Cassidy and say, what is one of the common lines Tess says all the time?
That's what I was just about to do.
Quality over quantity. Always. All right. Number 6. This one I like too. I like the rhyme. Don't low 5 the go live. So again, going back to our testing, our training, don't just assume that the go live is one specific date and then you're done and all good to go. Make sure that you're understanding the testing that's going to go into pre-go live, and then the training, and then the continuous support that's going to come post-go live. Because a lot of times customers are surprised when they recognize that it's not just that one date. There is going to be more maintenance. There's going to be more training, support tickets, and user support that's needed after that. So understanding that timeline is going to be super beneficial for you and also help heartache in the future. So that's another big one. I have a lawnmower randomly coming underneath this window, so apologies if you can hear that. And then
so much for the hour of solitude.
Someone's gonna get it after this.
Yeah. And then number 7 to cap out our 7 do's and don'ts. Can I get a drum roll? I feel like we gotta end the 7s.
There you go. Drum roll.
Perfect. Number 7 is, again, this is a stretch, so bear with me. Do not be insecure and impure. So this means, again, kind of stretch it a little bit.
I have to know what this is.
making sure that you are understanding your data sensitivity, understanding the security measures that need to be taken in place for your data. Obviously, this is definitely unique per customer. We have some customers that their data is extremely important and needs to be super secure. So understanding what those regulations are, what controls you need to have in place, what data encryptions you need to have in place, audits, etc. All of those things are important to understand. Again, not as relevant to some customers as others, but understanding that is important. So you don't want to be insecure. You want to be secure.
Yes, so. Don't be insecure.
But if you feel insecure, again, remember, I'm a mental health first aider, so I can come talk to you and make sure that you feel secure.
Data sensitivity, extremely important. That was, Tess's top 7 do's and don'ts.
That was awesome.
Those were excellent. And if you don't follow those do's and don'ts, you know what you'll be doing at the end?
Yes. And then we'll have to come in and help. And we want to be helping from the beginning.
It's much better to plan and have a successful implementation than it is to try to cut corners and realize that you didn't save anything by cutting those corners. Well, Tess, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I understand your time is valuable.
This was an honor. Thank you so much.
Glad to have you.
It's always a pleasure to have you, and we will have you more because now we do need to have a follow-up conversation on TikTok and
absolutely.
how to get the word out and what we can do to spruce up things. Maybe you could even write the bio, or what do you call it, bio, Kris? We'll let you write the description for this podcast.
I did actually enjoy your bio. I've been literally asking anybody. I've been having your podcast on in the background, and everyone's like, "What are you listening to?" I'm like, "It's Dynamics Corner. Get with it." So I'm your biggest fan now. So I'm going to be coming up with some ways to help modernize it, even though it's already in a really good spot. So
no. Well, listen, there's always room for improvement. You could be in a good spot, but you can always be better. That's true. We're
still students. We're still white belts. In this place.
Well, this is a great podcast. I've really enjoyed being on it. I've enjoyed listening to other podcasts and other guests you've had. This is really an awesome thing you have going. So I'm honored. And next time
cute.
I'm going to be wearing my I Love GP shirt. I'm so upset I forgot it. So I'm going to be wearing that. And then I'm going to add to the back of it, I Love BC. So then I can just do I Love GP and then turn around and be like, I Love BC.
That would be a great shirt. But maybe, well,
I'll
have
make
some
one
other
for you
ideas.
guys.
Do it. I'll wear it.
Perfect.
I will wear it. Anything that gets sent to me, I use or wear.
Oh,
you've heard back.
You're opening up the door there. That could be, I'm going to use that to my advantage down the line.
That door is open for you. You don't even have to knock.
Wow. Perfect.
And I'll open it for you. No, but we do appreciate it. We look forward to speaking with you again. Look forward to seeing your description for this podcast, because we will use the one that you write for everybody that's listening. So read it. And how can listeners or anybody get a hold of you to learn more about what you do with sourcing, to help answer any questions and find out about all of the other great things that you are doing for the community?
Anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tess MacKay, super easy to find. My email is t.mackay@nigelfrank.com. And all of my cell numbers, phone numbers, office numbers are right in my signature. And I'm happy to connect with anybody anytime, just to connect or to answer any questions or to help support and make sure that we're doing the do's and not doing the don'ts. So anytime.
It's excellent.
Right,
Thank you. We will put that information at the bottom of your description for the LinkedIn and for your email for individuals to get in contact with you.
Perfect.
Again, thank you again.
Thank you both so much. This was awesome.
All right.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
Tess.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.